And beautiful. Hello, hello.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Good to see you, everybody.
See you too. Okay, I'm going to do just a very little introduction. And again, I probably will leave a lot out. And so feel free to fill in any gaps that I do leave out. And give me just 1 second here. Okay, so next we have Dr. Rubin. Ian Rubin is um, let's see, is a wellness coach, coach educator, founder of Whole Self Wellness LLC, and CEO of foodstorycoaching.com, as well as an adjunct professor and most beloved bestie colleague at the National University of Natural Medicine. Ian currently wears three hats as an instructor. He teaches, his courses focus on health coaching, the psychology of food choice, food anthropology, and food relationship coaching. As a coach, he offers food story coaching, his proprietary approach to food coaching developed over the last 16 years in one-on-one and group settings. The approach is driven, I think I'm going to skip because he'll kind of talk about that. And then also as a veteran coach and educator, he brings over 2 decades of experience in the health and wellness industry, consults with businesses, agencies, organizations, and wellness promotion companies to improve employee or client wellness. The one thing that I'll add that's really exciting, and most of that I was reading off of the NUNM faculty profile, is that food story coaching is now being offered to not just nutrition students, but I believe ND, correct me if I'm wrong, students as well, that I know for sure nutrition. And I think that that's really important. I think we're very slowly starting to see evolution and change in what are, maybe younger students, what education they're given on nutrition. And I think so much, the education and training that we receive when we're in those training periods, when we're in school to become a naturopathic doctor or a nutritionist or, whatever it is, that's often what we rely on. And so I think it's just really beautiful that students are kind of getting this perspective on nutrition, that it's not just calories in, calories out, movement and things like that. Um, and, really in that sense as well, really extra relevant, I would say. And I think I'll turn it over there. There's a lot more that I could say, and please feel free to fill in the gaps. I'm
Happy to
so
do
grateful for you
so.
being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. You just saved me 3 to 5 years worth of work because you called me Ian Rubin.
Oh,
I
yeah,
now
I
have a
did. Yeah.
PhD. I've been given an honorary PhD, everybody, by Brennan Bray. So, hey, from now on, I want to be called Dr. Ian Rubin. Actually, the joke that we have is that my wife is the doctor. She's got the doctorate. I have a master's degree, but I am not a doctor of anything. But that being said, most of what Brenda said was accurate. I probably should update the NUNM website. It's been almost 18 or 20 years that I've been now doing this work. And as she said, I'm mostly teaching the Masters of Nutrition program at NUNM at the National University of Natural Medicine. But as of this winter in January, I will begin teaching naturopathic students as well. So as part of their nutrition second year curriculum, I'm very excited that I'm going to be teaching them food relationship coaching, which is the fundamentals behind food story coaching, which is just my branded trademarked approach. But I teach the fundamentals of that in food relationship coaching 101 to all of the nutritionists and now all the naturopaths. And then I have an advanced course called Food Relationship Coaching 102, basically. Advanced food relationship coaching for those who are wanting to dive deeper into that at the university. And I also have a certificate program for working professionals in the field who want to add food story coaching to their repertoire of skills with their clients. So I'll be talking all about that today. So I'm going to kick off with the screen share and have some slides. And Brenna, if someone would like to ask a question, could you maybe moderate the questions?
Yep,
And then
absolutely.
if you could give me a countdown if I go past, once I get to about 15 minutes to the end, I'd love to know where I'm at. I'm going to try to keep the time, but I won't be able to see a clock. So
Yeah, beautiful. If folks add questions, would you like me to kind of interrupt and share them or wait until the end?
that's fine. They can go ahead and interrupt, and then I will answer it if I can quickly, and if not, I'll hold it to the end.
Cool. Sounds great.
Okay. All right, so here goes my share. Let's make sure everybody can see the same thing. Are you all seeing a slide? Hopefully everybody is seeing
Yes,
my
we are.
slides.
Yes, we are.
Very good. Okay, then we're where we want to be. Very good. So today I want to talk about opportunities and possibilities in the world of treatment for BED, for binge eating disorder, as well as improvements in mental health outcomes. So trying to bring the conversation about both BEDs and mental health and where food story coaching may be able to fit in as complementary and sort of integrated care into the system. Again, want to thank Dr. Bray very much for her contributions to this presentation. So any and all mistakes or flaws or anything that one would critique, that is all my fault. Nothing to
It's all
Dr.
me.
Bray
That's
here.
all. That was all mine.
It was all mine. It was all mine. Okay. Okay, is my slide not going to advance? Okay, click. Hello, let's advance. Okay. So she did mention most of what I did and what I do, so I won't stay here and talk about that, but clearly I'm biased towards this work. So take that all with a grain of salt. Quickly, just want to kind of set the table, as it were, with a quick introduction, as well as part two, which is a quick introduction to the idea of what food story coaching is. I'm really going to try to move as quick as I can through those first two sections because I'd really like to spend most of my time unpacking the third section, which is a skill building workshop, which is basically explaining to you some of the skills and techniques and methodologies that you should be able to put into place first thing Monday morning with your next client. I'm very action oriented. I'm a coach, so I'm very much about what can we do about that right now, right here, rather than pure theoretical academic information. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's just my orientation. If there's time at the end, we'll do more Q&A, but again, feel free to ask questions and we'll sort of proceed on that basis. Okay, so setting it up for why do we even need to talk about additional support in this world is what I want to kind of set the stage for right now. So laying out the quote unquote landscape of what we're working with, sort of, you're going to use this plate analogy, you're going to use a lot of food metaphors, it's going to be really corny and just steer into the world of food. So forgive all of the bad puns and dad jokes that come along with this. So again, some of this has already been covered. So again, I'm going to go briefly through this. We know that eating disorders are a continually growing concern in our field. So it's important that we continue to look for opportunities to improve our services. We know again that they're undiagnosed, untreated, and underappreciated. Often we don't know that someone has an eating disorder, or especially BED. BED tends to hide in other disorders as well. Uh, we have a big gap, right? We're still working. Dr. Bray and others are continuing to push the bounds of research, learn more, study more, educate us more about what's going on, who needs what treatment, for what conditions, under what circumstances. So love that you all are doing that work for us. My big ballywick, one of my big sticks here is to understand that food relationships and disordered eating is a biopsychosocial, I would add cultural or environmental component, right? It all comes out of the biopsychosocial cultural model of why people do what they do. That's the class that Dr. Bray was referring to. I teach a class called the Anthropology of Food Choice, or Food Anthropology, which looks at the biopsychosocial cultural model of why people eat the way they do in the United States. It's not just cravings and desires, it's very complex. Because it is a complex issue, we know that treatment guidelines are wanting us to take a multifaceted approach. That's why there are so many different types of practitioners on this webinar, and it's why we need more and more people with different and unique perspectives to bring their skills and talents to the table to help us help our clients. So therefore, food and our relationship to food and with food is incredibly complex, and we cannot just fix it with one answer. So more tools, the better. So these multifaceted approaches include much of what we've already probably heard from other presenters. I apologize I was not able to be here for all of your wonderful presentations. I was at another training, so I know that most of you have covered a lot of this. Different types of therapies, specifically CBT and IPT. In many cases, a client will get medication. Clearly, they're going to most likely need nutrition counseling, and depending on the client, they may need behavioral health coaching, which will help them work on weight loss. Now, there are additional treatments that do have some support and are being used, and those are, of course, all the MBIs, mindfulness-based interventions of different types, specifically MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which fits into the world also kind of as hand in glove with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. However, there are also, and where I'm going to be leaning into, are these other psychodynamic and humanistic therapies that have developed over the last, well, been developing for many, many years, but have really come to the fore in the last maybe 10 or so years and have become considered a bit more respectable. You're going to hear me talk a lot about things that any of you who've studied Jungian psychology will be having a good time. Many of you who will have never studied Jungian psychology will be like, whoa, that's new and different. That's one of those humanistic therapies that sort of fell out of favor when CBT got popular, but I find it to be very powerful and effective. Some would also call that psychodynamic therapy because he was a compatriot of Freud's. So, little sidebar there. Okay, so let's set up some of the guidelines and sort of again what's happening. We know that if we kind of use the clinical guidelines of care, using the idea of sort of the caterer, we're setting a table for this type of thing. So again, psychotherapies are really the main entrees. Those are the things that we lead with when it comes to eating disorders, EDs, not to be confused with the other type of ED, which we won't talk about, but EDs meaning eating disorders, but especially BED. We're going to be using those as sort of, filling the plate up with psychotherapy, especially. And then, of course, medications, we're going to dose response to certain clients. They're going to have, maybe more salt, maybe more pepper, maybe there's some more exotic spices that a client needs. But generally, we start with these kinds of major seasonings to the meals. I don't know, nutrition counseling could be considered your dinner salad. Maybe that's not the best metaphor. I don't mean to imply anything about salad that's good, bad, or otherwise. I'm just steering into the food metaphor. So forgive any associations or inadvertent connotations. Behavioral weight loss, again, maybe that's one of the side dishes. Not everyone's going to need it. Side dish just meaning that it's not the same as the main entree. Now, for some clients, that side dish may be very important, very nutrient dense, might be a big piece of what they're working on. Again, forgive any connotations that might be associated with this. These are just, again, poor attempts to set the lay of the land for us. Again, the additional.
Those were my metaphors, and I think they are darn good ones. Okay, you
I'm not suggesting that they're not good. I had another person read my presentation, and she suggested that some people, potentially people in bigger bodies, potentially people who have their own
Mhm.
eating relationships, might read into
Beautiful.
that we're saying
Beautiful.
the dinner salad and side dishes are some sort of comment about
Yeah,
nutrition
yeah, yeah.
counseling and behavioral weight loss.
Beautiful. I mostly jump in to say I take responsibility for the metaphors.
Okay. Again, I found no issue with them. You found no issue with them, but I speak to those just in case someone would have any chance of misperception. But yes, that is true. Dr. Bray gave me those ideas in her. That was part of her contributions, which again, she and I thought were totally fine. I'm going to leave it alone. Just move on. MBSRs and these additional empirically based treatments could be just more of a style, right? Bringing some other styles of the main entrees that you want. And then where food story coaching fits in, I don't know, something fun like maybe it's the fancy fork or it's the dessert spoon, right? It's a specialty skill, it's a specialty tool that we would add in, right? Not every meal, not every client's going to need specialty tools, but for those that do, and for those mid-level care practitioners, this might be a fun additional tool in your tool belt that you whip out when you need it, right? If you need it for the right client at the right time. So again, just leaning into these fun food metaphors. Okay, so I want to set the stage for why food relationship and food story coaching. And again, I use those terms often interchangeably, so don't get confused. I bring those in for many, many reasons, but one of the big ones is that if we're going to lean into this idea of nutrition education and weight loss support, a lot of times this is what's happening with our clients, right? That you give them a program, you set up a follow-up, they come back in a couple of weeks, and one of three things generally happens. Now, this isn't the only things that happen, but this is super common. They haven't done anything. They just flat out didn't put into implementation anything you gave them. Well, they tried, but not really very much, and certainly not enough to really move the needle. Or they did try, maybe they overtried, maybe they undertried in the sense of like they tried a lot or tried a little, but they were just overwhelmed by the whole situation and they just were like, I can't do this. Well, I'm sure you know you're not alone. I'm sure many of us as practitioners have run across these challenges. And it's really super common in our field, whether it's the medical side, whether it's the mental health, whether it's us in the specialty fields that we do. More and more, what happens is no matter how great the information is, no matter how great the program is, if the patient slash client isn't ready, this is my favorite phrase, one of my favorite phrases, if the client isn't ready, willing, and able to follow through, then we're going to see poor adherence to our programs, and then we can get into that loop of, oh, they're non-compliant, and it's the client's fault, and that just leads us all down all kinds of terrible roads, because then it doesn't help the client get better. So why are they not making some of these changes? Well, we know why they're not making some of these changes. It's because, whoops, sorry, I was trying to get rid of the header there. Why are they not making a lot of these changes? Well, I'm not going to read every single one of these quotes. It's because emotions are most likely what are driving their behaviors. And no matter how rational and how committed and how intelligent the client is, when they read the program and they go, yes, I understand what you're asking me to do, they're not able to step into action, not because they don't know and not because they don't want to. So it's not a lack of knowledge or desire. It's that their psycho-spiritual, emotional, energetic, whatever you want to call it, components are driving their behaviors and making it hard for them to step into new behaviors. So we know that this is having an impact on mental health. Not to mention that the fact that many of these clients and patients of ours already have mental health concerns. They're already not feeling great about themselves. They're having increased shame or judgment. They're doing the coulda, woulda, shouldas. They have reduced sense of agency and self-confidence, right? But if they are not having success implementing the programs that we're giving them, then that just adds to their feeling of failure. I can't do this. This is another program that I've failed. What's wrong with me? I'm the one that's the problem. It's not the program that's a problem, because again, I understand the program. I want to do the program, but I can't do it. So clearly, even in our patients and clients who have BED, they're going to have even more of this because of the added stigma and the challenges that are inherent to BED. So I'm sort of laying out why this is such an issue. And again, nobody here is surprised by this, but we all know that food and dietary issues are not just um, rational logical issues. They're very much driven by this biopsychosocial cultural model. And so if we simply go into just change it through dietary restriction and or eat this, don't eat that, this is good for you, this is bad for you, eat more of this, eat less of that, and just build nutrition plans, we shouldn't be surprised that they're not making great progress, because we need to come up with these new ways, continually come up with these new ways to help our clients actually implement the plans that we've developed for them, which are usually great plans, and when implemented, have great positive impacts. So that is where sort of we start from. And so therefore, okay, well, what else can we do, Ian? Well, my bias is that we lean into behavior change management, psychology, and coaching, so that it's not all nutrition education, but that we take people as a whole unit and understand the sort of more psychosocial, spiritual, emotional components, and say, okay, rather than just dumping more information on them, how can we work with them as whole people, truly meet them where they are, address things like motivation and internal motivation, negativity, positivity, agency, help them see that, hey, yes, making dietary change is important, but we can work from this other perspective, maybe take some baby steps into, well, where's the resistance? Why do you feel like you can't make the change? And work from that rather than just keep going back to the nutrition plan and saying, well, let's put in another swap, or let's just do some more meal planning, or let's just do some more time management, which those may be helpful, but often clients are like, yeah, I've already done all that and I'm still not doing it. So this is an invitation to say, well, what if we added this other approach? So coaching creates, in our mind, those of us who are coaches, sustainable, realistic change, because it helps the client shift away from, say, for example, fear to positivity, or focusing on the positive rather than focusing on the negative. Rather than being extrinsically motivated, they work towards more internal motivation, right? And coaching is really so much about action, but we've come to realize that while we want clients to do more and not necessarily know more, we also recognize that their beliefs often shift before their behaviors do. And that's a real flip of the coin for a lot of clients, and even for some practitioners who, well, the client's not being productive, they're not making changes. Well, they may not be making changes that you can see or that we can measure, but they are making changes on the inside that are preparing them to be able to make changes that we can measure and see on the outside. So when we think about it from a coaching lens, we think to ourselves, well, knowledge is important, but it may not be the driving force that gets the client to move forward. So rather than always default to teaching the client more about nutrition, we're always asking, well, what will move them forward? What will actually help them make forward progress in either beliefs or in the sort of measurable actions that we're used to seeing? Now, this type of work requires of the client that they must be ready, willing, and able to take the deep dive into themselves rather than just be continuing to struggle with logistics and time management and shopping lists and meal planning, which is what many of them have experienced, especially if they've never been given actual personal care. If they're just figuring it out on their own, or they've only read a book, or they're on social media, they might just be focused on the wrong thing. This work is hard. Let's not, let's not kid ourselves. This is challenging work because it's personal growth and development. It means internal self-reflection. It means bumping up against our internal ideas and belief systems and rules and regulations and who am I and oh my gosh, right? This is challenging work. I didn't realize I was going to have to do this. And it's ultimately about what I would say is, by any other name, the serenity prayer. What can I control and what can I work on? What can I have influence over? What can I not have influence over? What can I let go of? And finding that balance so that the client can then, as I like to joke, put the emphasis on the right syllable rather than trying to do things that are not things that they can have an influence on. Now, especially with BED clients and patients, what I've learned is that a lot of their benefit happens during clinical care, and then when they get out, there's some gaps, or people who don't know that they may have BED aren't getting the treatment that they need because of the tendency to focus almost always on the sort of science of nutrition component. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that. When those patients need that information, this is an invitation to say, okay, well, yes, and what else can we bring to the table? Okay, so I feel like I'm making good time. I want to just do a quick overview about food story coaching. Again, I'm labeling this as a hopeful addition. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, obviously over time, about whether this was effective and useful for you. Um, the theory that we're working from, Dr. Bray and I, was that this food story coaching idea would be a great thing to implement in mid-level care as a complementary and integrative health option. So those of you who are already in nutrition counseling, behavioral health coaching, maybe you're doing something in that realm, you're a nutritionist, maybe you're a naturopath, maybe even like myself, who still does fitness coaching as well. Maybe you're one of those folks. And you're in that middle zone where you're like, I'm working with my clients and they're still struggling to make changes with their diet. Some may or may not have a diagnosis of an eating disorder, but you've been trying to get them to make change and they're not making change. So you say, well, let's try this. And we say, well, let's explore your relationship with food and see what we find. And it may lead us down broadly one of two categories, which is, I think I'm seeing somebody who may have an eating disorder, specifically maybe binge eating disorder. I'm going to refer them out now that I understand that's what's happening. Or, hey, this is actually really helping them make change because we're uncovering the hurdles to behavior change. We're using behavior change management rather than just nutrition education to help move the dial. And hey, this seems to be working. Let's do more of this. So food story coaching, I hope you will see as I flesh it out more, might fit into this circumstance under certain conditions. Now, this food story coaching is not designed for eating disorder treatment specifically. We don't do that by ourselves. We always work in conjunction with formal eating disorder practitioners, obviously people coming with trauma or mental health concerns. We're referring those folks out, and we usually work in conjunction with them. It's an additive system. It is not a freestanding system that can include, can't encompass everything that a patient needs. It's definitely an add-on. So the way we do our work is, again, we work on clients' relationships with food, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, should, shouldn'ts, yes, no, good, bad, always, never, all the confusion, all the paralysis by analysis that they're, stuck in. We're trying to unpack all of their deep and complex relationship with food. And what we find is that, again, leaning into the Jungian world of symbolism, that food is one of the most symbolic and highly meaning parts of a client's life. clients don't just eat food because it's good for them or bad for them. They eat it because of all of the different labels that are on that food, all the connotations, all the narrative, all the story, all the history and experience of that food. So when we say you can't eat that food, we're taking away all those experiences and all that meaning. And if we say eat this food instead, we're saying this food comes with all of those other meanings that they have put on them, and they may not want to consume the food and that meaning, those connotations that are on that food. So we help them unpack the psychosocial, spiritual, emotional nature of their relationship with food rather than it only being about what they know up here in the sort of front brain intellectual. What we hear from clients all the time is, oh yeah, I know what I should be eating. I don't need more information about nutrition, but I'm not doing it, or I don't do it well, or I don't do it consistently. We say, yes, we understand that. So we don't necessarily lean into the nutrition plans. We let nutritionists and the naturopaths do that often because they've already figured that information out. And the last thing about the sort of broad picture is, of course, we explain to clients that there's nothing wrong with them. They're not broken in some fundamental way. They're not irretrievably damaged. It's that this is conditioned response. This is learned behavior from family, culture, social environment, experience in general. And we can, in effect, using the story metaphor, we can rewrite, we can edit, right, the story that the client has. Because if they can rewrite their story to one that changes their fundamental interactions with food, then their behaviors change, they eat differently, their outcomes change, and hey, what do you know? They're healthier and they're happier down the road. Okay, so what feeds, again, leaning into the pun, what feeds food story? Well, there's two main categories. Of course, there's interactivity, of course, here, but there's the big picture of culture. And we all know about this, right? Over the last 10 years, I'd say SDOH, which depending on who you ask, it stands for social drivers of health. Other people will say it stands for social determinants of health. I like drivers of health. I think it's more accurate to say that SDOH drives people in certain directions, but it's not determining, it's not deterministic that they will go some certain direction. That's just my choice. But we know that cultural narratives, media, socioeconomic status, all the messaging that's out there in our culture, especially in the social media space right now, right? Where you grew up makes a big difference, right? In sort of cultural narrative. If you grew up in the West versus grew up in the East, right? That culture is completely different, right? So then the individual experience where you grew up, that's affecting you as a person, as an individual person. Did you have ACEs? Did you have childhood traumas? You know, little t trauma, big T traumas? What was your family of origin? Did you come from food scarcity? All right, what's your personal psychological makeup? Where do you fit on the neurodiverse spectrum? What health concerns are you dealing with, right? What's your education level? All of these things that are personal to us creates our personal food story along with our cultural food story. And these interact together to create my food story, your food story, our client's food story. So I want to talk specifically about some of the scientific, if you will, or some of the influences behind food story coaching that we feel add some legitimacy to it. We're in the process of constantly trying to find ways to add validity to our system and to bring it to the light of practitioners who can say, oh, I see it's validated because it's, associated with this or came out of this, field of study. And, someday maybe I am writing a book, but someday maybe I'll be able to get some studies done. But in the meantime, what we found was that food story coaching fits into a handful of very commonly known um, methodologies and mindsets that are effective in the BED world and in the eating disorder world in general. So this is all of the influences or a number of the influences that food story coaching comes from. I'm just going to speak to a couple that are highlighted here because they're the ones that are most well researched and documented to have an impact, a positive impact for our patients who are dealing with BED or potential eating disorders in general. So narrative-based therapies. Well, you've probably already picked up on this. Food story. What's your food story? Well, clearly that's a narrative approach, right? We tell me a story, tell me all about it, right? We want to know what the narrative that's running in our clients' heads is telling them about their relationship with food. You should eat this. You shouldn't eat that. This is good for you. This is bad for you. You're a good person. You're a bad person. So narrative approaches like food story help uncover the internal tapes that are playing in our clients' heads that create an inner world, a tapestry that says, this is how life should be, this is who you are, this is how you should behave around food, this is how you should eat, et cetera, et cetera. Think about your body. So Dr. Bray specifically talked about this in her talk. So again, I won't read each of these quotes. She's probably already given them to you earlier, but it speaks to the power and the value of bringing the narrative of these clients out in front for them and for the rest of the world that is working with these patients to help us understand what they're going through, to help normalize it, to help reduce stigma, and to help clients see that, yes, we understand that your lived experience is this real thing that we can work with rather than only work from, studies that maybe don't reflect the client's experience. 12-step / motivational interviewing, while there's not nearly as much direct data here and studies, I suspect many of you know that there is strong anecdotal evidence, and most of us have probably experience just working with motivational interviewing and 12-step interventions to see the benefit. And hopefully that will continue to be seconded and thirded, as it were, supported by continuing research over time. So again, a little stretch here, but not so much that I think it's unreasonable to consider using Food Story because it has a sort of 12-step / motivational interviewing basis and component. Because again, it's always about ownership. It helps clients own their condition. It helps them say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm going through, rather than I'm sure you've all dealt with this with clients where they'll say, well, you know how it is when you eat really bad, right? Trying to get them to own that. Say, well, when I eat badly, I feel this way. As well as witnessing and being witnessed. The last speaker was just talking about the power of witnessing and being witnessed. It's huge. Holding space for themselves and for others. That's a lot of what this work does as well. And then leads them in towards some of that CBT, DBT thing and sort of reframing what's going on to this is just how I'm wired. This is how I'm built. This is the things that I do. How can I find a way to be more compassionate, less judgmental, so that I can find a way forward given that this is what it is, rather than I'm broken, I'm irretrievably, damaged, I can't fix myself. Well, what if we just accept that this is how you're built and this is what's going on for you and we work within it, right? So motivational interviewing talks a lot about leaning into resistance, right? Just let that resistance be there. Oh, I'm so terrible and I'm just a terrible person. Well, tell me why you feel that way, right? Interviewing and telling me more about that can help us unpack where does that story come from, and then that can help sort of turn down some of the intensity of that and help them be like, oh, I see where that's coming from. I think I can work with that a little bit better. Okay, so specifically because we take this approach, we find that Food Story coaching has direct, specific mental health benefits with our clients. And that's a lot of what it takes to help clients with binge eating disorder, eating disorders in general, right? Is when we can turn down the volume of the shame, blame, and judgment, when they can, again, recognize how they're not as broken or as damaged as they think they are. We can lean into positive psychology and say, but what can you do? Build up their capacity, help them see that they do have agency, help them see that we're on their side and want to help them succeed, that we get what they're going through, and that we can help them sort of take a bigger picture on what they're going through, that food maybe can move away from being quite as much of the enemy to rather just something that they're working on and trying to improve. So that just helps them in the mental health space so much, and then that reinforces their ability to step into the behaviors. And the more they step into positive behaviors, the more it feeds back into feeling good about their mental health, and then it just keeps feeding into itself back and forth, like that. Okay, how am I doing on time? Hopefully pretty good.
You're good. We're 5:38.
And I started at 5:10. Okay, yes, I started at 5:10. So 30 minutes. Awesome. Still a little slower than I wanted, but I think we're going to be okay. So now this is really where I think you want to start taking notes and paying attention. All the rest of the stuff was sort of just laying it out and setting us up. Here's where I'm hoping you'll get something of use that you can take into your clinic, take into your next patient's circumstance, and try it if it's something that moves you. So Food Story coaching is built around what we call the 4 A's of Food Story coaching: awareness, analysis, acceptance, and action. So we work clients through this non-linear, semi-linear process. It's interwoven, but most clients we're sort of working them through a relatively linear process with any given step because clients rarely have awareness of what's going on. They haven't spent much time analyzing it. They very rarely have they accepted what is that they're working on, and then therefore they are limited in their actions. So it doesn't have to be linear, but often it is. And what we have found is that clients, regardless of where they enter our world, our sphere of influence, as some of us use, whether they know they need to work on their relationship with food, more and more clients are coming to me and to my practitioners saying, yeah, I have a totally effed up relationship with food. Oh, I know my relationship with chocolate's out of control, or whatever the case may be. That's great. Some clients are showing up ready to go. Others are like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like the kind of classic, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And some are just like, wow, I really need somebody to help me actually get this done. Like I think I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not really doing it. So can you help me with the logistics of actually putting this into action? So what we find is that regardless of the starting place, food relationship, food story coaching can be helpful for those clients to make forward progress. Okay, what is food story about then? Well, ultimately it's about behavior change. You could have the best food story, but if it doesn't translate into your behaviors changing to improve your health and well-being through nutrition, we haven't done as much of our job as we would have liked to. So again, I'm not going to read every single one of these components, but you can review them. But we're always forward focused. We're always action oriented, just in the sense of forward momentum. Doesn't mean that that has to show up on a to-do list. It doesn't mean that you have to visually see the client making the change in what they eat, but moving forward, right? If it's belief systems, thoughts, and attitudes, great. If it helps them expand into what are they ready, willing, and able to do right now, helping them find that path forward, we are totally down for that. So we focus on an empowerment first model rather than an education first model. We certainly understand the value of nutrition education, but more often than not, what we find is with our clients, they know enough that if they could actually implement 80% of what they already know, they could have great success. And they tend to they themselves think that they need to lean into knowing more. If I just knew more about carbs or calorie balance, or should I do intermittent fasting, or should I take this drink or supplement? Like, no, that's not as much as what it is. So we're always looking for behavior change, but we know that most behavior change that's sustainable comes sort of, if you will, from the inside out, right? So it's changing the mindset, which leads to behavior change. The process, broadly speaking, we just want to remind anyone who's either new to coaching or even if you're familiar with coaching, as a reminder that coaching is an exploratory, it's a collaborative dance between you and the client. When coaches stay open-minded and curious and non-judgmental and allow their intuition to lead rather than following a checklist, what they find is that the client starts to open up more, builds more trust, and is more likely to talk to them and say, hey, yeah, there is this other thing that I haven't talked about, and let me tell you about it. So when in doubt, ask the client to tell you more, tell me more about that. Encourage them to flesh it out with, colorful language. We in our industry so often get stuck in facts and figures and logistics and very, um, cut and dry data when the client's experience is very nuanced, right? It's all in the gray. So we want to give them a chance to talk about that. And then, pull on those threads when you hear an interesting word or you hear an interesting topic come up, or you hear them use a word that you think, boy, that could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. What do you mean by that word? Tell me more about what you mean by that word. And that way we give the client a chance to unpack it rather than assume, oh, they must mean this. And we say, oh, well, if it's that, then this is what I want you to do. So we're much more connected to just the exploration and letting the client know that there's no right or wrong way to take the journey. We just want to help them unpack their relationship with food in a way that helps them feel like they're making forward progress. So what that means for us is we're leaning heavy on preparation and contemplation over just the action steps. And that means that, again, being goals over doing goals become our priority. Not that we don't want them to physically do stuff. Of course we do, but we find that when they really put their mind behind preparation and contemplation, it can lead them into more actions over time rather than just giving them more to-do lists. So again, reminder about good coaching. Those of you who are already good coaches know this. Coaching leads from being a good human. Good humanistic therapies and coaching recognize that this is a human-to-human interaction. So it's more important to be a good human first than be the best practitioner in the world and know every single step along the way. if you don't seem like a good human, if you're not open to the client, if you're not attentive to your own biases, if you're not energetically in the right space with the client, they're going to feel that. And they're going to be like, well, you're just trying to play the expert. You know, there's this joke in the coaching world, right? Many of you have heard this. Try not to be the sage on the stage, but be the guide on the side. So if we take ourselves out of that hierarchical mindset and we come down to being just an equal human and be more human, maybe be a little bit more vulnerable and natural with them, break down some of that client coach barrier, which is tough for a lot of our professions. We've been told you've got to keep that professional distance. And we're not suggesting don't be professional, but maybe there's a way to soften it or modulate it in a way that can help the client see that you're way more humble and open to their experience, not quite as rigid about, well, this is the way we do things because this is the way it's always been done. So, we find that the collaborative nature of food story coaching and coaching in general helps the clients feel like I'm being seen and heard differently. And the clients say that, oh, my practitioner is working with me. They're not just telling me what to do. So that leads into one of the most powerful components that we believe in, which is the power of ask, don't tell. Whether you're a personal trainer, nutritionist, naturopath, it doesn't matter in our field. 9 out of 10 of us were trained into this idea that when a client asks a question, you tell them an answer. It's this ping pong tennis game of question to answer, question to answer, question to answer. And what we find in the coaching world, and especially with food relationship coaching, is if you answer the first question, we're probably missing the real issue. So we tell our coaches, ask more questions than you do telling clients what to do. So ask, don't tell just kind of reminds us that before I respond with something and say, well, this is what I think is happening, or this is what I think you should do, or why don't we try this? It's wait a second, let's ask a couple more questions and really get underneath it and say, tell me more about that. What did you mean by that? Are you saying it's this or are you saying it's that? When you say A and B equals C, what do you mean by that? And we ask a few more questions and then we realize, oh, the client's never been asked these questions. That's often what we hear from our clients, which is, oh, I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. So then it's like, the power of silence. Be quiet, let them think about it for a second, let them answer the question. And it doesn't matter what the answer is, it's really the contemplation of the question. I want them to ask themselves these questions. Whatever the answer is, we'll just work with the answer. But a lot of times, practitioners jump right on that first question and then give something right away. And so just want to encourage you to remember the power of ask, don't tell, which leads into language, which I sort of alluded to earlier. There's a couple, there's two major pieces, of course, right? There's their language and your language. Well, so for clients, they have their own internal language, right? What are they saying to themselves in here? We want to be attentive to that. Our job is to really pay attention to the external language and then ask them, well, how does that balance out or how does that comport with their inner language? So when clients use well, you know how it is when you have a really bad day and you come home and you eat a ton of really bad food and you're like, who is this universal global you you're talking about? They're trying to offload their relationship with food to this universal third person or the we, right? Rather than say, I do this, and because then they got to own it. That's tough, right? And this is what this work is all about. It's owning, yeah, I come home and I feel like crap and I'm tired. I don't want to deal with food, so I just eat like crap. And then I feel like a horrible person, and then I binge or I purge or I overexercise or I do whatever I do. Well, they need to say that out loud. And when they do, things start to transform, right? Now, guilt, shame, all kinds of emotions might come up, but that's the point. If they're never acknowledging it by saying, well, you know how it is out there, those people who do that, then they don't necessarily have to confront their own internal experience. And then, of course, our language is super important because they are listening. Man, they've got ears like radar dishes up like this. I had one of my clients. She said, "You've got to teach your clients." She said, "You need to teach your people this." The people that I was teaching food story coaching to. She said, "You need to teach practitioners that my radar is on double front. I am just waiting and listening for you to say something that's judgy or that is sort of side compliment, not quite like I am they're super keen for us to say something that says, yep, there they go. They're judging me. They don't like me. They think I'm a failure. They don't. So our language is super powerful. So just remind yourself that your language is incredibly powerful. So we've got to be careful that we don't say things like, well, you need to, and you should, and you ought to, and have to, and always, and never, because they hear that and they internalize that. So just be careful with your language, right? And use the language that the client uses as much as you can without over parroting. They call it parroting in motivational interviewing, where the client says, yeah, I feel like I'm such a failure. And you say, so you feel like a failure? Tell me more about that. You just want to use their words as best as you can, because when they hear their words reflected back to them, they're like, did I actually say that? Or no, that's not what I meant. And if we don't use their own words and we only ever paraphrase and summarize, sometimes we miss some of the power of a specific word that they're using. And the only way to do this is, of course, to be more conversational and keep it kind of more friendly and less rigid and sort of less interrogational and like, like you're going down a checklist of things. And at first, that can be challenging for some of us. We've been taught to be more professional and more, maybe not aloof, but a little bit less soft and gentle and friendly. But hey, this is an invitation to blend these components together. So as I talked about earlier, we are focused on not just the classic doing goals over here on the left-hand side of the screen. Everybody knows that you have to do some of this if you want to be healthy, let alone whether you have a BED or any type of ED, right? If you have any kind of, disordered eating or eating disorder, clearly eating healthier is going to be important. Working out, sleep, stress management, these are all critically important. But the stuff on the right, the being goals, we find are what is missing from a lot of our clients, that they don't have these. They don't feel good about themselves. They don't have agency. They don't feel good about themselves. They have a lack of confidence. They're not being patient with themselves. They're being perfectionistic. They're not being compassionate. And I can teach them everything I need to know, or they may know everything they need to know about how to eat well and move and exercise and sleep. But all of these belief systems, these being and ways of being, keep them from being successful. So we're trying to find ways to help them be more compassionate, for example. Well, we have to find these bridge actions that are concrete enough that the client can conceptualize them and can, quote, do them, but we want them to do things on their being. So that's where, as many of you probably already do, mindfulness, prayer, meditation, nature walks, right? All of these types of things that are skill sets and doing actions, but they're doing for the internal work that we were trying to get out of the clients, right? Rather than doing the meal plan and doing the shopping list and doing, the spreadsheets, which is the classic thing. So remember, being and doing goals are both important. We just find that when we lean into the being goals, the doing goals tend to happen more naturally, more easily, because they're sort of welling up from the inside of being the person that they want to be, or being the person who does these things. So that when we get into goal setting, and again, goal setting is a funny word. A lot of people, they hear goal setting, they hear SMART goals, and they just roll their eyes and they're like, oh my gosh, more goal setting. We were very gentle with our goal setting. We used lots of language that's not the word goal setting: intention, invitation, try on, experiment with. We try to avoid saying goal setting specifically and use other language that sort of softballs it, so they don't react quite to that natural reaction to like, goal setting. And we like to say that we want to pick goals that are small enough to achieve but big enough to matter. So often clients are not doing that. They're picking goals that are massive, right? Oh, I'm going to stop sugar tomorrow, right? I'm just going to walk 5 miles a day starting tomorrow. Like, well, the reality is they're probably not going to be successful with that. Although, hey, if you can be, great. So it's not a bite-sized chunk that they can actually have success with. Or they pick something so small, but they don't really feel like it's valuable and worth their time. So often we'll tell clients, not we, but often clients will be told, just try to drink more water this week. And they're like, well, who cares about drinking water? What's the freaking difference about how much water I drink? It doesn't matter to them, right? To them, it's not important enough or big enough, if you will. So it's not just big, meaning physically big, but valuable enough to them to feel like it matters to do that. So we always want to sort of balance out small enough to achieve, large enough, valuable enough to matter. That therefore it creates an intention, a desire, sort of intrinsic motivation to, yes, I think I can do this, and it's important enough for me to try to do this. And so when we review what could be the hurdles that could get in the way of being successful, we often end up retooling the goal because the client realizes, oh, that's too much for me right now. It's the wrong time. Got a kid that's sick, got a promotion, got a parent aging, got a parent visiting, going to be on vacation, new dog, whatever it is. And one other big piece, maintenance or kind of steady Eddie, just kind of keeping on, even if it's exactly the same goal, is fantastic. Our culture tends to be very linear and progressive in its nature. Like, oh, if you're not making linear and progressive improvements, then you're not making progress. we don't think so. Maintenance, just kind of steady, bumping along, doing okay, little ups, little downs. Like, hey, I'm getting there. I'm sticking with it. Hey, if you're sticking with it, that's way better than what happens for most people, right? Which is that they're super successful and then they crash. Super successful and then they crash. I'd much rather see somebody sort of just bump along than have these big, peaks and valleys in their success, which is why we focus on process versus, say, outcomes, right? How are you doing with the process of making and setting and achieving goals rather than constantly being like, well, what was the outcome of goal one, goal two, goal three, goal four? Maybe that's not as critical right now. Okay. And check with them about their expectations because their expectations are going to guide how you're going to build goals for them. Obviously, there are lots of hurdles, so remember to talk about hurdles. Hurdles are critical, both internal and external hurdles. So check with them. That kind of is in that realm of helping figure out, is this the right goal at the right time at the right place? What will get in the way of you being successful and can help tweak the goal. And then what do they need? How are they doing up here, i.e. their food story or thoughts about it or expectations about it. And so then you can sort of blend these together and kind of play with hurdles slash goal setting slash hurdles slash goal setting till you come out the other end with, okay, looks like this is the right thing to have a set for you to work on between now and next session. If you haven't done coaching, this is some components of coaching that we find are really helpful. Resistance, just like the MI people tell us, roll with resistance. When a patient or a client pushes back on you, say, I don't know if I want to do that, or I don't know if I can do that, or I don't know if that's important, or I don't like that. A lot of us get defensive because we're like, well, they're pushing against what we believe to be the best option for them. And so a lot of us get our egos tweaked, especially if we're young practitioners, we're new at this work, we're kind of feeling a little, nervous maybe about our skill sets. I was there, I did it for years. Nowadays, I'm just like, tell me why you don't like that. I just take it. Great. Tell me more about that. Why are you resistant? Why don't you like that? Why do you think that's a dumb idea? And then it just downregulates their sort of defensiveness, right? Because they expect me to push back. And if I don't push back, then they're like, oh, maybe there's no fight here. It's okay to be pushing back on me. And they're like, oh, it's okay to push back. Oh, okay, maybe I'm not as angry as I thought I was, or I'm not as whatever about as I think it as I am. Obviously, hurdles, we can't necessarily remove the hurdles. Those of us in the coaching world, because we don't do psychotherapy, we don't do true mental health work. We can't remove the barriers of their crappy job. What we say is, well, let's just work to get you over, under, pass through, how do we proceed even though that hurdle is there? A lot of times practitioners get stuck in, well, I can't fix that for the client. And it's like, we don't have to fix that for the client. You just have to help them figure out a way to negotiate it. Of course, double check, never assume. We all know the joke about assuming. So, checking in with them, following up, asking more about like unpacking the story. Don't just go with the first thing that comes your way. And lean into positive psychology, which is, lean into the positive piece without being toxically positive. We're not trying to like be ridiculous about being positive, but positive psychology does seem to have some good evidence that if we would take a strengths-based approach, work with people with their strengths rather than focus on the negative, it can help them feel more agency, more self-efficacy, and they can move forward more easily. Obviously, checking in with our clients on a regular basis. How are we doing? Have that big conversation about like the work. How is this work working for you? What are you liking? What aren't you liking? Help me be a better practitioner. Help our relationship work better for you. And I cannot say enough about these last two, which is don't rush the process. A client might take some time, and we call it staying in the eddies. You know what I'm talking about? Like little rivers, and there's like this, you can see a leaf kind of going in a circle on a little creek, and eventually it eventually just finds its way out of this little eddy. Stay in that. Tell me more about that. Let's unpack that some more. Do you want to talk about that some more? Do you think it would be valuable for us to explore this some more rather than just be like, oh, that's that? Okay, well then here, let's fix that. Like we just tend to just drop right out. Spend some time in there. And the same thing with silence. The most powerful thing right now we can do in many cases with our clients is they say something and we can just be quiet and let them sit with what they just said or sit with the question that we just asked them. In the sales world, there's a joke, which is that when you ask for the sale, you say, will you buy this? They tell you to shut up because the first person that talks bought the product, bought the service, right? So if we say it first, now it's on us, right? The client hasn't had a chance to say what they need to say, process what they need to process in that sort of way. So when in doubt, it's very uncomfortable for a lot of us as practitioners to sit quietly because we feel like we're doing it for like 17 minutes. We're like, oh my gosh, I've just been sitting here silent. I'm not giving the client anything valuable. In fact, you're being quite successful with the client because you're giving them the time and the space to do their own work. So That's the sort of high look at some of the major components of food relationship coaching that I think would help you have this conversation with your client. So my encouraging words are to take what you like, weave the bits and pieces into what you're already doing. If you want to do this work and sort of do it specifically with clients and like actually build this into your practice, obviously, we have practitioners who do that. They just do food relationship, food story coaching. If you like the way this work sounds, look for someone who does this work. Collaborate with them, have them to refer to, maybe bring them on staff, have them come do trainings like this one. Um, so we're encouraging people to weave this in where and however they can. Okay, I'm going to conclude and then give us a chance to do some Q&A because I think we're about the right time to start thinking about Q&A. Uh, Dr. Bray was very supportive of this work because what she said was this is a great way to include a novel treatment that champions the narratives and the lived experiences of our patients. And that seems to be one of the most powerful things we can do to help our clients. So I feel strongly that food story coaching fits that bill. I hope that you feel that way as well. I'm working to validate this approach through, again, Dr. Bray and I are talking about potentially doing some research work together, maybe some publications. Would love to hear from you about how it's working and what's not working and how you think it could be better. If you're looking for collaborative ideas and just want to just nerd out on this topic, again, there's my information from my website, foodstorycoaching.com, and you can reach out to me at ian@foodstorycoaching.com. Okay, we can open it up to Q&A, I suppose.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Um, there's a question in the chat from our Facebook stream, but I just
Yes.
first I loved if you can maybe go back one
Mhm.
slide.
Oh, sure.
I loved that. Oh, forward one, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
That
please.
one, yeah.
Thank you.
I love that quote that you had, the first bullet by Dr. Bray. Could you maybe expand on that? I just couldn't help
Oh, we just goof
it.
off every time you and I are together. We're just like laughing all the
I
time.
know.
So good.
It's great. Um,
Well,
so
Doctor, yeah,
go
do you want to
ahead.
expand on that yourself? I mean,
Yeah.
it's your
No,
it's your quote. I'm happy to speak to it, but
no,
you
no.
really are the
I
one that.
was I was joking. Although I will add, I mean, just to really hammer the nail
Yeah.
home, yeah, it's one thing that I think there's a few things that I think are so innovative about food story coaching and also
Mhm.
potentially very impactful. And
Mhm.
one is the opportunity to really champion patient narratives. And this was actually something that came out as a theme in my postdoctorate work when I was interviewing experts in the field of binge eating disorder. So, researchers, clinicians, as well as MD, PhDs, and healthcare administrators. And many endorse this theme of being able to take and kind of raise and amplify the narrative of folks who experience binge eating disorder, in part, as Ian, I know but like, as I kind of talked about, we have this issue in binge eating disorder where historically our research that informs what we think we know about binge eating disorder recruits from treatment seeking samples, which has very low face validity. It's like less than 5% of all folks who, 15 to 10% of all folks who experience binge eating disorder. So there's kind of just in that, there's really a dual benefit, right? We as providers get the benefit that we're kind of um, removing our own stigma and our own biases and just listening to the client. But then, in a research perspective, that can also help the collective and kind of re-inform, how we think about these things.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other piece, oh yeah, the other piece, and you really touched on this, so I don't really maybe need to kind of underline it, but I will. I think I don't know that eating disorders are maybe so, I think they are unique. I could be wrong, but I think eating disorders are somewhat unique in that at least binge eating disorder, APA guideline treatments, as really beautifully described, are one, psychotherapy, which can be administered by someone with a, master's, LPC, requires a bit of training. two medications for folks who fail to respond to psychotherapy alone or prefer medication. So that would be like a, MD, psychiatrist, and then nutrition counseling and behavioral weight loss coaching. And these are both things that can be provided by mid-level care providers who may not have any training in eating disorder. I mean, I also just, there's such a large variety of heterogeneity in what training you get when you have a nutrition or health coaching certificate. And so I think, and the data that we have suggests that most folks who are receiving care for binge eating disorder, that's who they're seeing.
Right.
That's at least the first point of contact. So that's where I think something like this, as someone who works in the health coaching space myself, I think it can be helpful outside of if you're working with someone with an eating disorder.
Yes.
It's just good kind of coaching practice.
Yeah.
But then certainly, I think if you're one of those folks who that's your training, that's your background, and you are kind of seeing more clients or specializing in eating disorders, I think this is where it can offer a bit of almost like standardization in protocol kind of a thing.
Well, I'll be very curious to see how it goes over the future. As I mean, I've been doing this work for almost 20 years, and I'm curious where it's going to go over the next 20. Uh, you know, can we get it to that place? But what I will say also to add to that, and then I'd love to hear see if anybody else has any questions, which is that we find that this work I believe this work could help in the eating disorder realm because so many of us are frontline workers, whether we're personal trainers or nutritionists or wellness coaches. And if we have a broader, better understanding of eating disorders and food relationships, we can spot those patients and clients who are not getting standard of care, who may not even think that they have a binge eating disorder or any type of eating disorder, et cetera, et cetera. So we can be the gateway to proper treatment and collaborative, multifaceted care if we can take this broader approach and not be so stuck in our own little window of, well, I'm a nutritionist, therefore I must only talk about nutrition ed.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
beautiful.
Anyone else? Questions, comments, thoughts?
There's a question from our Facebook feed. Uh, can training and food story coaching only be accessed at NUNM, or is it offered separately from
I
NU?
so I offer my coaching certification program through my website, foodstorycoaching.com. So yeah, I created the Food Story Coach certification program because students were graduating from our program and either A, hadn't had a chance to take my class because at the time it was an elective, or they wanted more. They're like, this was a great class, but now I don't feel confident and ready to go, Ian. I need a full, soup to
Yeah,
nuts
yeah,
course that'll give me the confidence to get out there and do that. So it's a
yeah.
self-promotion here, I'm sorry, but it's an 8 component course, walks you through all the principles, foundations, methodology, skill building, circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. It's got a mentorship program, et cetera. So when you're done, we are confident that you will be able to say to your clients, put it on your website, put it on your card. I am a food story coach. I do food story coaching. And you can do it that way. So yeah, feel free to check it out, foodstorycoaching.com. I think it's like slash professionals technically, but this will take you to the homepage and you can navigate from there.
Beautiful. And I put your email address as well as the foodstorycoaching.com in the chat. Somebody on the Facebook asked, is there mentorship? But you answered yes, there is.
Yes, yes, we do mentorship. We find that
Beautiful.
mentorship is probably the most important component of the work that we do.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
little bit of case studies, a little bit of grand rounds, a little bit of what are you going to do? What would you do in this circumstance? And so yeah, mentorship is a critical step of the program.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thank
I'm
you.
so grateful for you joining us.